What's going on, everybody? It's Friday, January 11. The weekend is almost here. Don't it feel good? Welcome back to FOXY Games UK. I'm Fox, your source of reliable video game news and rumour. So in today's video, the second and final part of yesterday's Everything We Know About PS5 and Xbox Next, Part 2. In case you missed it, and for your convenience, Part 1 has been linked in this video's description box. Check it out if you want to really get a complete context on every known fact, rumour and tantalising morsel of speculation. Again, I'll be offering new perspectives so everybody is up to speed on everything. Everything, at least we think we know so far. And all industry figure analysts and journalists quoted were sourced courtesy of techradar.com. Thank you, TR. Link in the description. Now, I suppose I could have began really part 1 and part 2 by reeling off every rumour I myself had reported dating back almost 14 months ago, some of which comes from trusted sources and some from outlets I feel do enough due diligence that I feel confident in them enough that really enough to report it on this channel, and I will do just that at the end of this video. Though it must be stated there are just as many rumours I come across on a daily basis that I do not report, primarily because, much like Santa Claus and his little elves, I don't believe in them. So, beginning part 2 with PlayStation VR. Sony became the first console manufacturer to embrace virtual reality, though if you examine PlayStation VR closely and observe how it operates on the PS4 Pro, it invites speculation about how a PlayStation 5 console might take VR to a whole new level. Currently, PlayStation VR operates at lower resolution than both Oculus Rift and HTC Vive, but as it stands, even its current incarnation almost pushes the based PlayStation 4 beyond its limits. Running a PlayStation VR on a PS4 Pro brings improved frame rates, which are very handy indeed in terms of the overall VR experience, but even the PS4 Pro can't overcome the resolution constraints set by PlayStation VR. So, will Sony want to return to the market with a second, markedly higher tech iteration of PlayStation VR? You bet they do. Presuming PlayStation VR is successful, and it already appears to be catching on, Sony will want to return to the market with a second, much higher tech iteration which would provide an obvious selling point for PlayStation 5, and if PlayStation VR Model 2 headset could be sold without an external black box, it should be markedly cheaper, rather accelerating VR's march into the mainstream. A recent report from Semi-Accurate which claims that the PS5 will have virtual reality capabilities built in at silicon level suggests this will indeed be the case. And Rebellion's Kingsley makes another good point about second generation VR. Anything that reduces the leads has to be a good thing, he says. Now, the umbilical cord, those leads which currently attach VR headset wearers to the consoles or PCs, obviously goes against VR's entire immersive nature, and we're already beginning to see, for example, a third-party implementation for the HTC Vive that renders it wireless. It's a safe bet that the capacity for running a wireless PlayStation VR 2 will be built into PS5. But Kingsley's PlayStation VR 2 wishlist goes further. Wide vertical and horizontal field of view would be top of the list, and of course that would require 4K resolution per eye and high dynamic range. HDR would be great too. Talking about HDR and wider fields of view really should be achievable, but sadly I don't think full 4K VR is likely to be a possibility even for PS5. As Kingsley points out, that would require 4K rendering per eye, which equates to 8K rendering overall, which we expect to be beyond PS5's capabilities, obviously. That said, perhaps Sony will find some clever technological bodge to get around that before it releases its 5th PlayStation console. I think not. It has been suggested that future consoles like PlayStation 5 could take radically different forms to current ones thanks to advances in cloud computing and game streaming, doing away with the components that make today's devices so bulky. However, I feel like it's unlikely that Sony will take a more Nintendo-like approach and put the PS5 in a tiny box. One reason for that is that the PS4, really Sony only just committed to using what are basically the innards of a PC. The first 3 PlayStation variants used proprietary components, and which in the PS3 impacted sales drastically. Developers certainly were massively relieved that the PS4 took the PC route. Here's a quote. "We always want fast CPUs and GPUs, but lots of fast RAM is also very important. It's no use having fast processors if they have starved data," Chris Kingsley said. Here's another quote. Ideally, developers want the ability to make the best games using the minimum amount of effort. We want to focus on being creative and getting things to just work, so the hardware should be based around current console hardware, which is in turn based on PC hardware. We also want fast CPUs and GPUs, and lots of fast RAM is also very important. There's no point having fast processors if they are starved of data. All the above are achievable, but will PS5 still have a hard disk? Sony Computer Entertainment President and CEO Andrew House spoke at the PS4's launch about how deciding to put hard disks and 8GB of RAM in the PS4 were both billion-dollar decisions. The fact that Sony has now made external hard drive support possible for PS4 and Pro is a step in the right direction, and this is something that could be carried over to PS5, which will undoubtedly have to deal with even larger 4K assets. It seems certain that Sony is very keen to hear what its community thinks. Recently, a group called PlayStation Voice sent out surveys to members of its closed community asking them what their expectations of the PS5 are via email. One community member posted the email they received and found themselves removed from the group entirely for breaking its non-disclosure agreements. That's NDA. Now, according to PlayStation Universe, PlayStation Voice is a community run by third-party consumers insight agency. Join the dots. Once information had been gathered, it's fed back to the client in this case presumably being Sony PlayStation. Admittedly, this doesn't tell us much about PS5 itself, other than that things are likely to be still very much in the early stages, well, at least over a year ago. While it's unlikely that Sony would use the information gathered from its communities to decide exactly which features will be included in the console, the ideas of fans can certainly spark a good deal of inspiration and really speaks volumes in Sony's desire to reach out to its loyal user base. Of course, if games were just streamed to the PS5, that probably would disappear entirely, and Sony already has a game streaming service in the form of PlayStation Now, as discussed in part 1. So why isn't this more of a definitive feature rather than something on a wish list? Well, Sony is remaining very tight-lipped about PlayStation Now uptake figures, but we suspect that they are pretty unimpressive. But they did report they had about 52% of the market share, which isn't saying much considering it's still a very young sector. It has certainly had issues with setting the right subscription charges from the offset, given that PlayStation Now effectively gives backwards compatibility, a luxury that was previously free for owners of PlayStation 2 and early PlayStation 3 consoles. There will be nothing to stop Sony launching a small form factor cloud-based version of the console for those with mega fast broadband. But the biggest issue is broadband speeds, given even 4K TVs require a minimum of 25 megabytes per second broadband in order to provide satisfactory streaming, and it's doubtful whether 4K game streaming with extra information on top of the visual side would even work reliably at such speeds. There would be nothing to stop Sony launching a small factor cloud-based version of the PS5 console for those with mega fast broadband, perhaps with a mobile's really phone-style subscription model that has an upfront hardware cost, something Microsoft is actively looking into. But for those really the PS5 to sell anything like its predecessors, there would have to be conventional versions with similar innards to the PS4. Chancellor Philip Hammond has previously announced an infrastructure investment aimed at bringing fast broadband and 5G mobile data to the UK, but the earliest that would have an impact would be 2021, and the PS5 will almost certainly arrive before then. Perhaps its first mid-cycle update, though, will be a streaming version which takes advantage of the burgeoning 5G networks, and with the rise of downloadable games, with really the continued eating into the physical disc market, means that pundits have been predicting that consoles will go discless for about a decade now. However, our guess is that PS5 won't be the first final system to risk venturing down that road, at least not until it catches wind of Microsoft doing exactly the same thing. Now, we all know Sony has taken a lot of really justifiable flack for not putting a 4K Blu-ray drive in the PS4 Pro, making it a rather less attractive purchase for film and TV buffs than the Xbox One S or the Xbox One X, though Sony's mantra is gaming first. Surveys continue to show that gamers are still attached to the possibility of buying games on physical discs, not least because they can sell them, a practice that the games industry hates by the way, and keep hard disk space usage at a manageable level. If Sony were to axe the Blu-ray drive from PS5, gamers really would expect several terabytes of storage in compensation. Kingsley gives the developer's view on the topic, stating, "I think the days of delivering films and games via disc are on the decline, and most people are going digital digital. However, some people like physical discs, so who knows whether that decline will level out and remain present at a lower level than now. So download figures have been on the rise over the last year, but EA CFO Blake Jorgensen has said that he thinks consoles and disk drives will continue to stick around. Here's a quote. Consoles and disk drives probably stick around for a long period of time. I think it's the consumer deciding what's the easiest way for them to buy a game, and it may mean they no longer have to really store down the high street for them to decide to buy it. Digitally, maybe it's easier for them to do. And given that PlayStation 4 was launched back in 2013, November is really the biggest time of the month for the console in terms of sales. Sony really shifted 5.6 million consoles in just really over a month, and Sony's previous consoles arrived in a 6-year interval. It would be easy to project that it will launch the PlayStation 5 really in 2019 at the earliest. The sort of technology available then should allow really easy access and full native 4K games without saddling the PS5 with a massive price tag, and by the end of 2019 4K TVs will be the norm rather than the exception in the average US household. 2020 might be the year in which Sony unleashes the PS5 onto the world as the first native 4K console with wireless VR, so long as Microsoft doesn't get in there first. So it would be a surprise if Sony doesn't want to capitalize on that at the earliest possible juncture. However, Kingsley points at the PS4 Pro and reckons that could have an really impact and effect on the length of the current console cycle, stating it's a difficult one to judge, but overall I think it's fair to say that the overall cycle will lengthen slightly. Well, especially if the PS4 Pro wildly outsells the base PS4, which hasn't happened and isn't something we anticipate happening once it's reached a critical mass of households with 4K TVs. So perhaps 2020 might indeed be the year in which Sony unleashes PS5 as really the first console and on the market before any of the Scarlet range push in the native 4K narrative. So what games can we expect to see on PS5? Well, if backwards compatibility, the patents mentioned earlier, really we can expect to see the whole PS4 library available to play on PS5 from day one, or perhaps we'll see another round of remasters as we did when moving from the PS3 to the PS4, but that is unlikely given the two would use very similar hardware setups. Now we imagine that there will be some games being developed specifically for the new PlayStation 5 console generation, with major exclusives going forward, and the extra power isn't likely ready to be offered ready for the PS4 base. Already we've seen CD Projekt Red mention that it's developing for this generation as well as the next, and alongside the rumours that there are already developer kits out in the open, and they think that Cyberpunk 2077 will be on PS4, PS5, Xbox One and the Xbox Scarlet line. Now here are some rumours that I basically put out there, but not in chronological order. PS5, really its spec and form factor are final. Multiple expert industry analysts and journalists believe both PS4 and Xbox One are pretty much done, and PS5 will launch at a consumer friendly price, really sold at a loss, subsidized by revenue from the monetized game sector. Now rumoured to use Ryzen 2600 and Navi 7nm GPU setup with 16GB of really possibly GDDR6 RAM with over 400GB per second standard bandwidth. Well, that's huge memory bandwidth, isn't it? Really huge. I know some of the PCs are up to 1,000 and middling around 600GB per second, but for a console with a very low API, 400GB per second is extremely fast memory bandwidth. At least 4 new studios dedicated to PS5 and PlayStation VR future projects. PS5 will likely receive a mid-gen upgrade after 3 years on the market, much like PS4 Pro, as hinted by Sony European executive. Now PS5 will utilize advanced lighting and internally developed ray tracing technology across a number of its studios, and no doubt from AMD themselves. And PS5 power is rumored to really be, and this is by various sources, to be around 3 times the power of PS4 Pro, or 6 to 7 times the power of the vanilla PS4, taking it from anything from 10 to 12 T-flops. And a rumoured touchscreen DualShock 5 controller is said to be in the works, with a patent knocking about on the internet, and rumoured portable connectivity in the works a la Nintendo Switch. Fully backwards compatible with PS4 and PS4 Pro, pretty much a given, and PS5 is rumoured to feature cloud-assisted gaming and cloud gaming in general, so advanced it could make the PS5 virtually future-proof should Sony take that direction. PS5 will run PS4 and PS4 Pro games enhanced to 60 frames per second where there is a unlocked frame rate, and full 4K where dynamic resolution scaling is in use, and on the fly 4K asset replacement, effectively remastering PS4 games as you play on PS5. And PS4 Pro will eventually replace the standard PS4, which is going to be phased out by Sony sooner rather than later. And the latest rumor updates, it does look like Red Dead Redemption 2, the PS4 version at least, is running on the PS5. It's actually the first third-party game I'm aware of that is running raw and behind closed doors on PlayStation 5 development kits, basically confirming backwards compatibility right there. Sony using the Red Dead Redemption 2 as a tester for other non-Sony published titles. Rumor again, on average, PS4 games load 31% faster on PS5 via back compat, and it's variable, making load times really between deaths and fast travel less of a chore with time-wasting offenders like The Witcher 3 and Bloodborne, which is always a good thing. Rumor, Sony's next-gen console, PS5, automatically smooths out visual doorstep edges and jaggies and reduces shimmering around graphics as seen in PS4 games, and it does it at a hardware level when running PS4 games via backwards compat on a PS5. I think it's something that the PS1 and the PS2 did at a very basic and rudimentary level. Now, in terms of Microsoft's next-gen ambitions, rumored and reported, call it whatever you like, but the Redmond firm is said to have no less than 3 Xbox next-gen systems in development, mostly all in the Xbox Scarlet line, ranging from low, mid and high end. Reported by Brad Sams at Thurrott.com and Jez Corden at Windows Central, both had success with leaks in the past. Xbox codename Maverick, if not I'm mistaken, is a diskless, repurposed Xbox One S that also streams games entirely from the cloud, if you like that sort of thing, bolstered by Xbox Game Pass, and really a system in place that allows would-be consumers to trade in physical copies of their Xbox One games for digital downloads. Yes, Microsoft expect those customers to give up on physical media going forward. Rumored to enter the market at around $150 to $200, maybe less. Then Xbox codename Lockhart, reportedly an entry-level next-gen system from the Scarlet line, expected to be in line with the current Xbox One X model, only with a far more capable CPU and priced accordingly at around $400 to $450. And lastly, Xbox codename Anaconda, a high-end next-gen Xbox system rumored to be more powerful than Sony's PS5 and with an even more premium price tag to match, possibly $599. It's like I've always said, it really doesn't matter if you believe it or not. More importantly, what does matter is that I do. Those who insist on referring to me as a leaker or an insider, well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm afraid I am neither, nor do I work for Sony. Furthermore, I didn't just come out of nowhere. Foxy Games UK channel is over 4 years old, and I'm very proud of the work I've put into the channel, often hours upon hours each day, and I've really been involved in the game scene probably longer than a lot of you have been born, probably, and I will not really have some random anomaly born slap bang in the middle of the 3D era thinking they can define who I am. If you think I'm new to this, it's only because you're new to this. To the rational humans following this channel, please feel free to inform me how nice I am to you all in the comments, because part 1 and 2 of this next gen video special took over 10 hours in total over a 2-day period, but I think you're all worth every single minute of it. I felt it necessary since we've had a huge influx of new subscribers. Please make them feel welcome, as I know most of you will. I totally really appreciate you lovely people. And for all your current and next gen news updates, rumor and rampant speculation, hit that like button, spread the word, and keep it locked to Foxy Games UK, not least because you're all incredibly generous people. And remember, relevant links where applicable can be found in this video's description. While you're there, share your thoughts and opinions on today's news, because that unfortunately brings us to the end of yet another video. I know, but let's continue the discussion in the comments. Subscribe to Foxy Games UK, remember to hit the notification bell so you never miss content. Thumbs up if you like it here, very important that. And help us reach more like-minded gamers simply by sharing this video. Consider supporting Foxy Games UK via Patreon, and or grab yourself an FGUK branded t-shirt or hoodie, available in various colours and designs. You'll find both links in this video's description. Appreciate the support. And that concludes our time together today. It was really great hanging out, and until the next video, have a fantastic weekend, and always remember, play games, not corporations.